Hello, world, and welcome back to a brand new Breakout Finder videocast. I'm Nate Liss. You can find me on Twitter at @AnOutrageJew. And as always, to my right or left, I always point the wrong way, is my guy Ryan Lopes, who you can find on Twitter at StillRyan5. But tonight we have a special guest. He is a man amongst boys, and it's never been more evident than it is right now. A writer for TheRinger.com and a guy that you should be following already on Twitter. His name is Danny Kelly, and he can be found at Danny B. Kelly on Twitter. What is the good word, gentlemen?
What's going on, man? How are you doing?
Good, man. Good to have you on here. You're a tough cat to get a hold of, even though you said yes pretty much.
It's a busy time of year, man, for our buddy Danny here.
Yeah, dropping new content, man. It's super appreciated because like Ryan and I talked about kind of before we started doing these, you know, you're one of the minds, you're one of the people on Twitter and sort of in this social media, you know, NFL draft platform that really knows his stuff and is just a grinder. I mean, you were at Field Goals, so we appreciate that and love your takes. So we just really wanted to get you on here, man, and let you get some takes off. Obviously, it's going to be
fire off some takes.
Well, it's going to be like dunking after Vince Carter because we have Matt Kelly last week. So, you know, just put it
doing over the top. Doing over the top.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to try and compete with that, but
we're not.
I'll do my own thing. I'll lay it up. I'll do some.
There you go.
Slap glass after the layup. All right, man. Well, let's we're going to get right into this. So we kind of talked about sort of what your ideal show setting would be. You're really into the top 100. You're working on a lot of NFL draft stuff right now.
Yeah.
So Ryan and I kind of put together some topics we wanted to touch on with you. Let's just jump right into it, man. So in terms of favorite players in this draft class, and this is, of course, kind of a skill position, position-centric episode, wide receiver, running back, tight end, quarterback. Who are some of your favorite players in this draft?
So let's just kick it off with Hakeem Butler because I know that last week I want to say Matt
already
Kelly
my favorite guest.
He was going off. He was going off on Butler. I haven't got a chance to listen to that episode yet, but I saw on Twitter you guys arguing about it and talking about it, and so he's got to be one of the most polarizing guys in this whole class, right? At this point,
for sure, without a doubt. And it's weird because it was DK Metcalf after the agility, and somehow it rolled over to Hakeem Butler solely.
Yeah. So I personally definitely understand kind of where the detractors are coming from in the sense that, you know, he's tall, he's leggy. He's going to have to prove that he can get off of press coverage at the NFL level. I think all that stuff is valid. I think why I like him, though, are, you know, just natural gifts. Like he's very athletic, very fast. I think he's agile. I think he can get off a press. You know, he's not perfect at it, but I think he can do it. And I think he's also very good running from the slot. So if you run him in at either Z or slot where you can kind of get off the line without having a guy right up his face, like, to me, that is a way that they can get him involved early on until he kind of figures out, you know, kind of how to deal with guys like Greedy Williams, for instance, or whatever. And so to me, his athleticism, his body control, all that stuff combined with his incredible catch radius and his incredible ability to get downfield makes him just a really interesting prospect. I think he's got a really, really high upside. And it's, to me, like, very fascinating because, you know, we got guys like Greg Cosell and, you know, Josh Norris and Matt Waldman. They all love him. And then there's also guys in, I guess what you'd say like NFL media or whatever, Lance Zierling and Daniel Jeremiah, Dane Brugler, quite a bit lower, like significantly lower on him. And so he might have like a wider, I guess, sort of stock range than any player in this draft.
Sure. So, and you know, going back to what you're talking about with people's ranges, yours in particular, with your big board, where do you have Hakeem Butler right now?
I think he's at number 21 for me right now.
Okay, so pretty high.
Yeah, so he's up there. He's my second ranked receiver behind DK Metcalf, who is number 20. Okay. So
do you think Butler sneaks into the first round when the real bullets start flying next week?
Man, I think probably not. Just based on it, like all the different NFL guys that have connections and talk to a lot of people in NFL, it seems like he's going to fall into the second round. You know, it's like the whole cliche, like it only takes one team. Yeah. And, you know, there's certainly the option or the possibility that he could sneak into the first round, but it's feeling more and more like he'll be a second rounder.
What do you think these front offices, you just touched on a lot of different points. What do you think these front offices are kind of worried about or concerned about with Butler?
Well, he obviously had some drops on his tape, so that is that's a concern. And then, like I said before, just his ability to kind of like get in and out of his breaks and things like that. He, like I said, he's tall and kind of leggy, and there's not a ton of dudes in the NFL like his height that can really like move and stuff. And so I just think he's a projection at this point. So that's probably what they're afraid of. I think the analytics community, he did a late breakout. He was a 1 year wonder. Who played behind Alan Lazard, or I don't know how to say it. So,
yeah, you got him.
It's there's certainly tons of red flags, and so I kind of understand both sides of the Hakeem Butler thing. But when you think of him in like the light of a little bit bigger AJ Green or something like that, like it's really exciting. So I just think his upside is huge.
It seems like it's a fine line too, because it's like you always hear, obviously you can't coach athleticism. So the rare traits that he has, the size, the speed, the burst, all these things that are innate to him that you just can't go find with any prospect. And then you go look at his production, and it's like there's sort of a threshold. It's like, how much does he have to meet and how much does he have to show on film to pair with this level of rare athleticism and size for him to kind of check these boxes for most people? And I, to be honest with you, I didn't even hear that he was a potential early day 2 guy till you said it. I almost thought that he was a lock for the first round. Coming off all this stuff. I mean, obviously, a lot more than I do in terms of connections and speaking with people. It just seems unique, I guess, when you divide it down the line and you look at all the known analysts, and some guys are high, some guys are a little lower. If he falls in the middle, then yeah, it makes sense he'd be a round 2 guy.
It's a possibility for sure.
Well, here's a question for you, Danny. Since Hakeem Butler's obviously the hot topic right now, and this is what this is what the data guys are drilling. Of course, the late breakout, because historically, if you go look at all these guys and everybody's mined all this data and there's evidence of it. Now, it doesn't make it a fact. It just means there's a lot of evidence. Now, I realize that eventually should correlate to fact, but there's outliers everywhere. This is a guy that's almost 23 years old, which would be, late age to come into the NFL, broke out late. So how much for you does the production really matter? I mean, when you see a guy with this skill set, this athleticism, you hear the buzz from teams. Do you think teams look at it like, okay, I want those innate skills, size, traits over what he did in college because we believe we could coach him into the player we want?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't ignore production, and I think all that stuff is valid. I think the NFL maybe takes a little bit stronger, I guess. They take what they think they can turn a guy into a little bit stronger, I would guess. I'm not, making decisions for an NFL team, but there's a reason like Rashawn Gary is like a potentially like a top 15 pick or whatever, because teams ultimately they're in the career of projecting guys at the NFL level. It's not what they've done. Like, on some level, all scouts can take a look at the tape and say what this guy's done. Mm-hmm. Their job is to figure out what he can do in the NFL, and that's why it's fun. That's why it's impossible. And it's just kind of I when I watch Hakeem Butler tape, I get really excited. Like, it's fun to watch for me, which is a really probably dumb way to kind of scout, but I honestly kind of go with that. Like, if a guy's tape is fun and exciting, to me, that means something to me. So when I watch his tape, I just think there's so many different traits that I think are really exciting. He's going to be the type of guy I think that is really, really landing spot dependent. And there's a lot of guys in this class that are like that, but you have to have him with the quarterback who's going to throw with anticipation, that's going to trust him, that's going to kind of, give him a chance, because he's not going to have a ton of separation. There's actually quite a few players in this draft, receivers in this class that are very similar, I think, to that. Just not going to ever separate that much at the NFL level.
That makes sense. And I know Ryan's high on Hakeem Butler. I mean, Ryan, do you have anything that you want to add to kind of what Danny's already said before we move?
No, I mean, Danny, again, covered all the bases just like we totally expected him to do. So just a ton of knowledge there. No, I mean, again, I'm higher For fantasy purposes, of course, I would love to see him sneak into the top 32 and get that draft capital behind him. But I do think, everything that Danny brought up, and I won't say it to his face, but Matt Kelly again has some pretty good points as well. So I
see both sides of it for sure.
Exactly. And as much as my bias might leak out again, I'm a very big fan. He is my wide receiver too. The people that are on the other side of the fence, I really do think that they are justified, and he has become one of the more polarizing prospects. And I know in Danny's latest update in his draft guide, he does have the Plax-Buras comparison as well, which is what I know Cassell and them were tossing around. So that's some pretty exciting stuff. That's some high praise. So again, just a player that I'm really excited about, and I totally agree with Danny. If I'm watching a player and his tape is a tape that I can either come back to or walk away from feeling like that was a lot of fun, then that definitely means something.
And something that's always stood out to me, that you guys, I'm sure you know who Russell Clay is, something that he said to me one time when we were talking about two players, and I was like, I'm struggling between this guy or this guy, and they're both receivers, and Russell goes, which guy would you rather cover? And I was like, and then it seems so simple, right? But like, you think about Hakeem Butler, what he could truly be if you're a corner, a 5'11 corner, when you're lining up against 6'6", 225-pound burner who learns a little of the extra nuance, man, that is trouble.
You're in trouble, yeah.
Yeah,
he averaged like 22 yards per catch.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and his quarterback, was thrown all over the place. And so, to me, it was just, I don't know. I really liked watching his tape. The reason I've kind of come to the conclusion, or I believe strongly that he may be a second rounder, is like Daniel Jeremiah. What he says is not necessarily, canon or whatever, but there's just so many indications now that there's only going to be like one or two receivers in the first round, and it feels like the NFL loves Marquise Brown.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect segue to your second guy. You're someone that I guess you're pretty high on yourself.
There's no receiver in this class that's more fun to watch than Marquise Brown. His tape, to me, is the most, like, when I first turned him on, I was like, this is the best receiver in the draft. Like, immediately I was like, this guy is gonna be a freaking star. The only reason he's not my number one is because of the Lisfranc injury. And so, I should say, because of that, and because precedent is not kind to his size. He's 166 pounds. There's like, really, like, Deshaun Jackson is basically the only precedent for like being a big time player in the NFL at that size. Like, when you turn on his tape, I mean, this guy's electric. He's running past defenders. He's good after the catch. He's not just a deep threat. He's lining up at different spots. I think he could probably line up at the X spot sometimes. He can go into the slot. He could do whatever. He's a like a T.Y. Hilton style guy to me. And so the huge question mark, of course, is what's the deal with his foot? Is he going to lose a lot of that speed? Or even if he loses a little of it, like, is that just make him average, like an average player? Maybe. So he's really, really risky to me. But to me, there was no receiver that was more fun to watch on tape.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan.
No, I was going to say, the question that I had, and Danny again touched on it immediately, is for people like us in our shoes, again, we don't have access to these medicals and stuff like that. So you have to cautiously build in some sort of insurance policy or something like that. Because again, that for a wide receiver who particularly wins with speed, a Lisfranc in general has to be one of the more damning injuries. And I'm sure there's some sort of research out there that shows players, specifically wideouts, that have to come back from these injuries and kind of their careers after that. So it's definitely scary, especially for, again, a receiver that wins with speed and easily one of the most, if not the most, electric playmaker in this class when he's 100%.
Yeah, and just to me, everything you hear and read from guys that are kind of plugged in, it's like, it seems like the NFL really likes this guy. But the fact that he didn't run in the combine and he's had those injuries is a huge red flag. So I could see him falling into the second round too.
One of the other interesting things about his profile, obviously he has the production. I believe he came from College of the Canyons before his sophomore year, at Oklahoma. But The thing that really stood out on his profile to me was that he was never used as a rusher. He wasn't involved in kick returns. That's two things with T.Y. Hilton, with Deshaun Jackson, and a lot of these sort of, undersized guys that they had on the profile that kind of added to that as a sort of a data guy. Those are two factors that have oftentimes been, linked to sort of this NFL hit rate. Now, the guy clearly has the talent on the field. He runs the routes. He can play all the positions. So, that with the size, just like you said, with the foot injury, if the guy goes round one, I don't hold him to the same standard that I held, say, like Philip Dorsett to, or a guy like Devin White, or some of these other, Devin Smith, some of these other guys that have been sort of burners at the combine. Their trajectories, they spiked at this level because we haven't seen Marquise Brown test. He's coming off a foot injury, and he could be, there's a chance he's the second receiver off the board, if not the first. I don't know how high he goes. But I'm the same as you. All I hear is that he's going in the first round, and I'm just like, that seems crazy to me with all the risk, right? From a data standpoint, the risk, the size, the injury, just so many things. But I get the allure of it, right? It's like if you can get this guy dialed, if you can get T.Y. Hilton, that's incredible, but the advantage to T.Y. Hilton was that T.Y. was a third-round pick, I think. So that's where the value was. It's not that T.Y. is so great. It's that the Colts nailed him in the third round. Now, they still have to pay him like they got him in the first eventually, but you get a stud in the third round where I think you're paying full price for Marquise Brown with the injury,
T.Y. was small school, wasn't he, though?
Yeah, he was a Florida International, I think.
Yeah, so, there's a little bit of that baked in. I just think that the NFL highly, highly values explosiveness, like raw explosiveness.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so, we'll see.
Yeah, I don't want to jump too far ahead because we're gonna talk about favorite fits in a little bit. I noticed you had Marquise Brown listed in your favorite fits, and you got a couple different teams listed there. You didn't have the team that a lot of people are linking him to. As you know, it's John Gruden, pick 24, 27. To the Raiders. Again, I am, for better or for worse, I am a Raiders fan. I'm not going to go down that road right now, but I'm a little skeptical about Marquise Brown for some of the reasons that you just outlined here. But I can't help but get a little excited just given the tape and pairing him with someone like Antonio Brown and Tyrell Williams. So, is that a fit that came to mind to you at all? Again, we'll talk about your other teams in a little bit, but how would you like that?
Well, who's the quarterback?
Okay, next question, Nate. What else we got?
Is Derek? Do you see Derek Carr as the long-term answer there? Or do you think they're doing something on draft day?
No, so we had I don't want to get too far down this tangent, but Mike Gelkin, who used to cover the Chargers for San Diego, he is now the Las Vegas beat guy. Someone that I think is really, really respected in NFL circles in general. And he came out a day or two ago and just said the Raiders are not looking at quarterback early S4, 24, whatever. So I think his word is pretty much as good as we're going to get for someone that is as big of a wild card as John Gruden and first-time GM Mike Mayock. A lot of the stuff that I was hearing early on was that Gruden loves Dwayne Haskins, loves Kyler Murray, but to be determined, I guess. I don't know. I think this is a really big make or break year for Derek Carr. They're going to load up to see really what they have going into Vegas, and adding another weapon like Hollywood Brown or one of these early round tight ends. I think they're going to keep surrounding him with just stupid talent, just zero excuses, and kind of just let it fly. So
I like Fant more with the Raiders.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, let's go with the other wide receiver you have on this list, and then we'll skip to your running backs and kind of do them consecutively.
Sure.
So the next guy you have on this list, and his name hasn't come up a whole lot, but this is another one of those really good athletes, Emanuel Hall out of Missouri. Why do you like Hall?
Him? So he is freakishly athletic, like springy, explosive, smooth down the sideline. Like he can just eat up cushion in an instant. Guys tend to give him like pretty good cushion because he's just so fast off the line. I think he has the skill set to develop a little bit more in like a full route tree or whatever, but he's still really raw. So to me, he's probably like a second or third rounder. Yeah. But in that range, he's one of my favorites just based on his overall upside, his potential kind of as a deep threat. And just his athleticism, the way he's able to get downfield. He was a big, he had a huge impact on that offense. Like when he was in there, like their offense was so much better. And so I just think he's the kind of guy who can take the top off a defense. He's I think he's versatile enough to kind of run a full route tree eventually. He's definitely raw, but the couple of guys that he kind of reminded me of, Robbie Anderson and Martavis Bryant. So I just think he has that kind of like world-class speed. It's like the same deal with Marquise Brown. It's just, you can't teach that.
Yeah. And I think to your point before, just like I said with Brown, NFL teams fall over themselves for guys that have that speed. Every year we see it.
Yeah.
Al Davis kind of blazed that trail, talking about the Raiders before. I mean, stopwatches, man, and wideouts. Like people, again, speed is just that natural speed, especially at Emanuel Hall's size too, is super, super enticing.
Isn't Darius Hayward-Bay is still in the NFL, you guys?
Bro, is he still hanging around?
Or at least he was.
Never forget. Never
he was
forget.
Last year anyway. I mean, he made a pretty good career out of it. He was never a star, but
I was gonna say on the Emanuel Hall thing, man, I kind of made this comp a few weeks ago on a podcast I do with Matt Kelly, but man, I kind of likened Emanuel Hall to Brashad Perryman. I found a lot of similarities in the game. I mean, we talk about the rawness. We talk about that sort of burner athleticism at that 6'2", kind of sub 220, 200, 212 range right there. They had similar college dominators, similar deep yards per reception, both 95th, 97th percentile. And, they both kind of have that sort of odd production where you get it junior, senior year with Emanuel Hall. And, Brashad Perryman, just a really interesting case because that's a guy that a lot of people projected to sort of figure it out at the NFL level. He certainly had the draft capital. A little more production in his final year at UCF, but really similar as a sophomore. So these are two guys that just kind of, when I watched them, I saw a little bit of a correlation. That might be drawing parallels that don't exist, but comparatively, there just was so much to him. And I know that because one guy didn't work out, it doesn't mean the next won't. But this seemed like kind of like a case where I look back on it and I go, okay, why didn't Brashad Perryman work, especially on a Ravens depth chart that was devoid of literally anything, of his type. I don't know if you thought that when you were watching him. I mean, you just said, a couple other guys that you compared him to, but that's just a name that kind of floated out a few weeks ago.
That's an interesting one for sure. He actually kind of started showing up a little bit at the end of last season. Perryman, I mean.
Yeah.
He's with the Buccaneers now, so he's a guy to kind of watch, but I definitely see where you're going in terms of like that's the floor for a guy like Hall. Hopefully no one's spending a first round pick on him is kind of more the thing. But he's to me like in that third round range or whatever. I think he's an interesting player.
That's sort of where the NFL, I don't know that it's ever going to sort of recalibrate itself, but you look at some of these guys that get overdrafted, the Philip Dorsett, perhaps the Brashad Perryman, that are a little bit more developmental, where maybe they should have gone late round 2 or round 3. The problem is there's this rare sort of size and speed, and there's a ton of guys in this class that check that sort of size and speed box, but don't have the production, don't have the name. So it's just interesting. It'll see who do teams truly value and who are they going to reach for in this draft, because Emanuel Hall is a guy that you can probably grab middle rounds, 4th, 5th round. I don't know exactly where he's projected, but his athleticism is on par with probably half the guys that go before him, if not better.
Yeah. I mean, he's a freak. I think he had like a 44 or 45-inch vert.
Yes.
He can scoot. He's really, really athletic. I like, just the way that he moves. It's hard to like, I guess, define that, but to me, he's got easy speed. And so, I just think he's got a lot of potential in that. So, but again, he's not a first rounder, to be clear. That's why I think, the Brashad Perryman is definitely valid, but hopefully no one's spending a first rounder on him.
So, okay. So speaking of easy speed, let's talk about a guy that doesn't have easy speed that you got as a favorite, which I'm not as much of a fan of, but I'm very interested to hear your take. David Montgomery out of Iowa State. What's the story here?
I mean, have you watched the tape? I mean, he breaks down.
Nate, watch the tape for once.
I'm just kidding.
It's it's one of those things with him. I mean, okay, give me your take on what you see with him.
So, I'm completely aware of the, I guess, reputation that he's slow. I don't see that on tape personally. I think he's plenty fast. He's not going to hit a home run. He might get caught from behind, but he breaks tackles like a freaking maniac. And the way that he runs, his jump cuts behind the line, I think are very, very good. He creates yards for himself. He is, I think, a 3-down guy. He can impact in the passing game. To me, the speed thing is not as big of a factor. Like,
sure,
there's to me, okay, there's a highly athletic running backs are a dime a dozen. To me, I really just think that's true. You have to have like skill as a runner. You have to be able to create your own yardage. I think that's very like. That's something I always have in mind when I'm watching a guy is like, is he creating for himself? Because, you know, there's just a lot of bad offensive lines in the NFL right now. And so I just think I don't think he's a first rounder. I don't think he's on par with any, you know, with a couple of the guys from last year. Obviously Saquon is in a whole different class, but I mean, he's been very, very consistently just like the best tackle breaker in the college game. So I just think his ability to do that is going to be a big reason why he's successful. I don't know if he'll ever be a star, but I think he'll be successful in the NFL.
So go ahead, Ryan.
No, broken tackles, man, and yards created, all that stuff, and you know, stuff like balance, all that stuff matters to me, especially when watching running backs. David Montgomery was just such a weird case for me because those things matter. He does them well. As far as the tape, I enjoyed it, but I didn't have as much fun as I think other people had watching it. I don't know if it's just it was a consistency thing. Maybe he was just so good at just churning out those chuffy. There was nothing flashy or dynamic, but he just got it done, which again should mean something. But again, he just wasn't someone that I was like overly excited to watch and watch more of. Again, he certainly racked up the production. Obviously, as Nate kind of alluded to, you know, testing wise, you know, athleticism, it isn't probably where a lot of people wish it would be, but again, you watch him back on tape, and he doesn't necessarily look like a slow back. Not to say that he looked like a burner by any means, but he wasn't just chugging along. So
he's a little one speed. Yeah,
you know, and again, to me, maybe that was part of the boredom that I felt with it. Again, not to say he's a bad player, but I'm certainly going to be lower on him than probably yourself. And I think Nate's kind of in that same group. But again, it's easy to understand why, you know, people do gravitate towards him. Again, I think broken tackles is a super important stat, and he does that better than, like you said, almost anyone. So
yeah.
One of the things though, and to kind of give it, you know, devil's advocate here from sort of the analytics community, the thing that stands out on his profile that isn't fantastic is the agility score. And typically when running backs don't have the burst, they don't have the speed, if they lack the agility, that's almost a death sentence a lot of times, because like look at a guy like Le'Veon Bell, super high agility score. The agility score is really what does help define kind of sort of what these guys can do at that next level, because if you don't have speed, you have to have shift. And I get that he breaks tackles. So the question is, how is he breaking tackles? And I realize that there's a lot of people that say, you know, back at Iowa State, his O-line was only blocking 1 yard in front of him, so he had to do a ton on his own. And he does have the three down skill set. You're totally right, because, you know, just from a production standpoint, for sure, you know, he's got a 36 catch season on his profile. He looks fluid as a receiver out of the backfield. He's been a true workhorse the last 2 years at Iowa State, and he has faced good competition. The question is, though, is that lack of overall athleticism, is that going to be a problem at the NFL level? You know, I kind of feel like sometimes people are chasing Kareem Hunt in a way. You're looking for that sort of elite tackle breaker, and I know he did it more than anybody. I just question, when you get to the next level with bigger, faster, more keyed-in players, is that just average, subpar athleticism gonna be enough to get you to kind of get you to that level?
Yeah, I mean, it's all valid. It's that's why we talk about like physical attributes. That's why like we track all that stuff. I think it's definitely valid. To me, the things like his contact balance and his vision and the way that he makes cuts, I think is what sets him apart. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if he's going to be a star, but I think he has the skill set to. You know, again, it's going to be landing spot dependent, but I think he has a skill set to be like a guy that a team leans on a lot. You know, 3-down guy who, you know, is reliable. He doesn't fumble the ball. And he's just kind of one of those guys that he had 3 fumbles on 695 career touches.
Yeah, secure.
So, I mean, like, he's just rock solid. I compared him to Kareem Hunt. That's kind of the low hanging fruit. I think he's also kind of like a Royce Freeman style kind of guy. Like he's not super duper exciting, but like Freeman actually had some pretty good, like he was decent last year. You know, obviously he got overshadowed, but I think they have a similar skill set.
Right. And to the Kareem Hunt point, you know, Kareem Hunt's agility score was really low as well. So, you know, good burst, very low agility. So it's truly hard to say because, you know, it's there's always outliers and nobody is a carbon copy. There's no one for one. And that's kind of the issue when you look at data. You know, we try to make comps when we look at film. We try to make comps when we look at data, but nobody's the same case. And that's, like you said, that's what makes drafting super hard. Because you know, you might call a guy Brashad Perryman, and he ends up being fantastic, and you know, we might look for the next Kareem Hunt, and this guy ends up being awful. Yeah, and it's like, okay, what the hell went wrong? Everybody's not one for one, so it's a really difficult thing to do. So tell me this, David Montgomery, I feel like people are split on. I feel like a lot of people are a fan of Darrell Henderson, and that is who you have on your list. Why are you a fan of Darrell Henderson?
I mean, he's the kind of guy where you can see the athleticism show up. Like he's a slasher. He can hit that home run. He can run away from defenders. He's perfectly suited in my mind to be like an outside zone, one cut and go kind of guy. Like if you can get him downfield or downhill, he can just he has a way to find like daylight. He's really, really good. He's got good. I think he's got really good numbers like after contact and. Just getting him downhill is the key, though, because like I don't think he's the kind of guy who's going to make dudes miss in the backfield, if that makes any sense. Like Montgomery and the Penn State guy, Miles Sanders. Yeah, Miles Sanders. Both of those guys will like make guys miss, like Marshawn Lynch style in the backfield and like turn a 3-yard loss into like a 1-yard gain kind of thing. Henderson, I don't think is in that category. He's more of a slasher. But yeah, he's the kind of guy who like in an outside zone, like the Rams or something, obviously they've got Gurley already, but like, I think that would be a lot of fun. He's also very, very good in shotgun. So I think teams like, and we were going to get to this later, but like teams like the Texans or the Bears or Chiefs, all like teams that run out of shotgun a lot, he'd be a perfect fit for those guys and just like hit the home run, like explosive. He had 8.9 yards per carry, which is just absurd over the last 2 years. Yeah,
ridiculous. Is he a consensus like top 3-5 back for you, Danny, or is he like someone that you're a bit lower on, or where does he fall?
I forget. He's definitely in the top 5. Let me see. I've got Jacobs, Montgomery, Sanders, Singletary, Henderson, and I'm probably gonna have Henderson higher the next time around.
Yeah. So I asked because for me in this class specifically, again, not a good year to want like a stud running back. I think there's definitely some options at the top, but coming off the past 2 or 3 years, definitely a bit of a drop off.
The second, third round, I think, are
something like that sounds about right. And so, but for me, and from what I've been seeing, I think Henderson is almost a consensus top 5 guy, if not a top 3 guy or something like that. But I have been seeing, again, maybe it's just that time of year where people are kind of just bored waiting for the draft or something, or kind of overanalyzing, but a lot of people have kind of dinged him for, the offensive line was doing such a good job. The holes were so obvious. All he had to do was, again, to your point, it wasn't even a cut sometimes. It was just a gaping hole, and he just blew it open, man. So, I mean, again, you kind of hinted at his ideal fit and kind of where he needs to land, but do you see that as like as an obvious kind of limitation for him?
Yeah, I mean, I think the size thing matters too. I still think the NFL values guys that are like 215, 220 pounds just as like a 3-down guy. I think he was like 308 or 208, I should say. Something like that. And so like that could be another kind of knock. Like, is he the kind of guy that is going to handle 300 carries a year or whatever? It's just, I think those are the things that you have to worry about. But, there's definitely some bell cow type guys out there that are in that range. So it's just it's like you were talking about earlier. It's like you have to kind of just take every guy for who he is. There's no like cut and dry rule.
Yeah, I saw, and on the I saw on the Ringer draft guide, you drew the Devonta Freeman parallel, assuming that's obviously a pretty high end comp, but that could kind of be where his ceiling lies. I think with Henderson in particular, I saw a really big jump as his work as a receiver. I thought his hands got really good as the year went on, which obviously should help add to his profile. So
I just watched a game yesterday where Henderson ran. I think he was in the slot. He ran like a slot fade or a slot wheel route.
It was like 30 or 40 yards down the field or something like that,
and
right?
He caught it. He jumped up in the air and he caught it like as he was like pirouetting.
Yeah,
and then he just kept
ridiculous
downfield. I'm like, holy shit.
He's definitely got hands.
This guy can catch. This guy can receive. That's going to be huge for him. So I think that's definitely going to be a big part of it. And fantasy wise, like that's always just huge. So, I like him a lot too.
Yeah, and he's a guy that, people are going to talk about the conference, right? That the conference schedule wasn't great, and his offensive line may have been better than some of the D lines in the games that he played. But the requisite and kind of counterpoint to that is dominate then. If it's easier for you than it is other players, and you just need to flat out dominate. And that's what he did all year long. I mean, many games over 130 yards. I think he's got 10 on the season. He's got multiple games over 200 yards, multiple 3-touchdown games, 22 touchdowns on the year. I mean, he literally
he had 3,584 scrimmage yards and 36 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons.
Yeah. So
decent numbers. Decent numbers.
Level.
Yeah.
So a really good player, and he checked the box on athleticism. But speaking of sort of bell cow players whose athleticism is kind of in question, this is a guy that for some people has fallen sort of out of contention.
I'm surprised he's still high up on your list, buddy.
I'm sticking with it.
All right, talk to me about Devin Singletary.
Okay, so I think Singletary is a very interesting case study in the draft, and I'll explain why. So going into the combine, he was like the number 2 guy on a lot of people's top 5 list. I know I saw DJ had tweeted it the other day, or I saw DJ's tweet the other day that said Singletary was his number 2 running back going into the draft or going into the combine. Before the combine, everybody was comping this guy to LaShawn McCoy. You remember this?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And
he had super fun tape too. His tape defined fun.
And then all of a sudden he runs slow as shit, and everyone's like, "Oh, he's not explosive.
He's not LaShawn McCoy."
I mean, I didn't think he was LaShawn McCoy ever, but like people were saying that a lot because he looks fast on tape.
Yeah.
So like to me, he's exactly like Dalvin Cook. Like he's just fast on the field. He's like Montgomery, like Montgomery. He's not gonna like run away. He's gonna get caught from behind, and that's something that you just have to accept with him. But he's the same type of player in the sense that he's very, very instinctive with where he goes, where the way that he runs, the way that he follows his blocks. He has outstanding contact balance. He has outstanding quickness in the short area in terms of just his jukes and everything. He almost reminds me a little bit of Marshawn Lynch in that sense. Marshawn was an outstanding athlete, so it's not a good comp, but Lynch was so good at these little jukes that would get guys just like lunging at a cloud of smoke type of thing. And that's what I see when I watch Devin Singletary. I'm sticking with the tape on this guy.
Okay.
He might end up being like a 5th round pick.
Then going back to the
like I just really like his tape a lot.
Yeah, no. Now going back to it was good that we just talked about size at the running back position. So he is another smaller back, weighs a little bit less than Henderson. Do you see like a 3-down role in Singletary's future? Is he the same kind of super landing spot dependent, super scheme dependent, volume dependent?
I think it's possible. I wouldn't necessarily put money down on that. But I think it's definitely possible. He did at FAU. He has a lot of wear and tear, I guess, on the tires. He's run a lot in the last couple of years. But I mean, he's the same deal as Henderson. Like he's been crazy productive. And they didn't have him in the passing game very much this last season, but the year before, you saw signs of it.
Yep.
So I don't know. He's another hard case, but like, when you guys say my favorite players, I actually put a lot of guys I think that are kind of like everyone's arguing about.
I like that.
Because like it's like easy to say I like Josh Jacobs or whatever.
Sure.
But to me, Singletary's tape is very different than his testing and kind of like the amount that he's fallen off in the last couple of months. I mean, we really did go into the combine. Like a lot of people thought he was the number 2 guy. And now he's like fifth, 6th, 7th or whatever. So like the combine was really bad for his stock. Yeah. But it didn't change. Like the tape is still the same. So I just think he's interesting.
That's something I wanted to ask, and I brought this up to Ryan earlier today. So we spend multiple years watching these players play. We talk about them in the off season. Yeah, we look at them training in the off season, and then they do this one day where they test at the combine. This one anecdotal condition, they test at the combine, they shit the bed and completely underwhelm. And some people do a complete 180 on their rankings. So I guess my question to you, thinking about how, big media scouts work, or even yourself, how much do you factor back in to your rankings what they actually do at the combine? I mean, excluding knowing that a guy that kills at the combine just increased his draft stock, just in terms of what you foresee in their future with just their talent, plus what you know athletically.
Well, I bake it in a little bit because, like, it does matter. Athleticism matters in the NFL. I mean, it's the highest level of football, and you're around a bunch of guys that are the best player on their team since they were 5 years old or whatever. So, I think athleticism certainly matters, but I do think that we went a little overboard. Like I was, on like Zach Whitman did the Spark stuff on field goals originally. And I was like obsessed. The Seahawks were obsessed with Spark and like finding the top athletes. And I think almost people went a little bit too far on like the importance of Spark. I know the Seahawks did because none of their Spark guys worked out. And so, so I don't know. I just think, it definitely matters. I bake in the combine stuff. I think what I perceive to be a player's stock a little bit because I think it matters like how the NFL sees these guys. In terms of just like my overall rankings and stuff, like if I know the NFL is going to love a guy, I have to consider that. I still have like a guy like Rashawn Gary, like lower than most, I would say like the big media people, but you just have to take that into account, that teams kind of look at it with what they can turn these guys into. So I try and look at it from that point of view a little bit. So long story short, I do think it does matter. The combine testing does matter. But there are, I would say, it should be a little bit more of like a pass fail, I think, than people treat it. There's cutoffs and thresholds. If you're below a certain threshold, then and you're not an NFL athlete, that matters more than like if you're 15th fastest running back versus the first fastest. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's thresholds and tiers, I should say.
Yeah, and I see it all the time. I mean, especially being, kind of heavy on that data side of the world, that we guilty more than anybody are the ones that just run a stake through the side of these guys. After this happens, it's like, all right, blow it up, drop him off the rankings because Devin Singletary just totally crapped the bed. And it wasn't, he was being touted as one of the top players in the draft at his position. Then he tests, and then what happens, and I've talked about this before, not so much does he fall for guys like you, but guys that you didn't know about prove to be better athletes.
That's
and they
true.
Rose, right?
Yeah, I think that's more true.
Right.
Like when Miles Sanders tested, that's like you're like, oh, let me go back and watch this again, and I'm like, wow, okay, I definitely see that on tape. Like it matches up with what you're seeing at the combine. The explosiveness. He just flew under the radar before the combine. Truly, he was like a 1-year starter, even though he was a 5-star guy back in the day. Like sitting behind Saquon Barkley, you're gonna fall under the radar. And I think the combine is like, hey, go back and check these guys out and add them into your lists and things like that. It's like like a lot of analysts are still continually watching tape all the way from January into now. So I think it's it's one of those things where these guys can pop up and definitely go higher in the list
versus fallen. So
right, yeah. So like I think if anything, it was like I just realized I like Darrell Henderson a lot more the more I watch him. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, this guy, I like this guy a lot.
For sure, yeah. You pair that athleticism with that incredible production, and it's a guy that you may have had your thumb on, but suddenly you're like, okay, teams are going to take this guy seriously, you know, because now they've seen this athleticism, and you know everybody's going back looking at the tape. So, all right, man, we'll try and go a little quicker on this next row because I don't want to.
Sorry, I kind of
dude, there was too many nuggets to just not talk about.
Yeah, this is perfect, man. So, okay, let's talk about some favorite fits, you know, landing spots for some of these players. Sure. One that we talked about earlier, Marquise Brown. What are the spots you want to see him go?
Okay, so I think he would be a really fun fit on the Chiefs. That is honestly with Tyreek Hill or not. I think there's some question going on with what Tyreek's future is in the NFL if he ends up being suspended, or you know whatever, like cut. I think the Chiefs would be a really good landing spot just based on that offensive vertical offense. He's a stretch the field kind of guy. I think the same could be said about the Packers. I'm putting him with quarterbacks that are willing to chuck it downfield and are accurate downfield. And I think it'd just be fun with the Colts too, because like pair him up with T.Y. Hilton, and you just never know who you can guard in that. Who do you tilt the defense to in that defense in that offense? So like I just really like specifically those fits because with the Packers and Colts especially, like they still have needs at receiver. So he's not like going to go in and be like the fifth guy.
Right. So, okay, so what about then a bigger receiver, like talking about DK Metcalf and Hakeem Butler? What about those two?
I think both of those guys, the two teams that I have kind of circled for those two guys in particular are the Steelers and Bucks. Again, both of those teams have quarterbacks that like to huck it deep. You know, I think Butler particularly needs to get on a team that has a quarterback that is willing and able to throw it deep, because that's like what he does best. I think Metcalf can do a lot of different things. I mixed that up. I'm talking about Metcalf particularly needs to find a team that passes deep. I think Butler can do a lot of different things. Yeah. He's also an excellent deep threat. Sorry, I kind of just confused.
Yeah, it's all good.
But yeah, so like those two teams, the Steelers, I think Big Ben loves to pass it down the field. I think the Buccaneers with Bruce Arians are just going to air the hell out of the ball.
Yeah, can't wait. So I think all the Chris Godwin this year, boys.
Dude, imagine Evans with either Metcalf or Butler on the opposite side. I just think that would be really fun.
Just be absurd. Too much size on one field. So, okay, let's roll to the tight end position. We got a couple guys here from Iowa. TJ Hawkinson, who's considered by most to be the first tight end off the board in this upcoming draft. Where do you see good fits for him?
So the Raiders, they have the 24th pick, right? The 24th, and then 27.
And 27, yeah.
If Hawkinson falls to 24, he probably won't at this point, but I think the Raiders should like run to the podium if that were the case. And then the Packers, I just think would be a great fit for him too. I think they'd have to get him at number 12. He's not lasting to number 30. And so, and then I would say the same deal with Fant. I think put him on the Raiders and he can fill that Jared Cook role almost to a T. I think they're very stylistically similar players. He's obviously got a lot to learn, but like top tier athletes who can stretch the seam, who can pick up yards after the catch. I think that would be perfect for them. And Fant on the Patriots, I think would be a great fit too. I mean, you hate to invoke the Aaron Hernandez comp, but like that is like what he is.
Dude, we don't want to give New England either of these kids. That'd be worst case scenario for a lot of teams for sure.
So I like those fits a lot.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the idea of Fant going to the Patriots, it's like, how long are the Patriots going to have a stud tight end? I mean, I know Gronk tapered off, but God, Hernandez in his prime, you know, pre-prison Hernandez was obviously elite level of talent.
Yes.
This is the hard hitting stuff that we're really bringing to the table here.
Post prison Hernandez, not
dude.
As good
all I
on
know
the
is
field.
this is like it's terrible to even like talk about, but like it always is super surreal to me that Hernandez caught a touchdown in Seattle against the Seahawks after he had murdered multiple people.
Wow.
It is just crazy to think about. I was like watching that game live. You know what I mean? It was just weird.
Wild.
Anyway, the next guy I had on my list, Darrell Henderson. Again, I think the teams that run like a good amount out of shotgun and get a guy downfield, get a guy going downhill, or, you know, on the outside zone, one cut and go type thing. I think the Texans, Bears, Chiefs are all great fits. I mean, imagine if he was on the Chiefs. Could you see him just jumping Damien Williams and going ahead? Like, maybe not right away, but like pretty quickly.
Sure.
So I think that would be really interesting. I think Josh Jacobs on the Raiders is perfect. I think he would probably be like a 3-down guy almost immediately for them.
Do you think Jacobs is I mean, again, John Gruden, we talked about it before, just such a wild card. Do you think if a back goes in the first round, it feels like it's probably got to be Josh Jacobs at this point, right?
I would think he'd be the only one. I guess Miles Sanders could be like this dark horse to go in the first round just based on his athletic profile and people being kind of enamored with what Saquon Barkley did last year, because they do have a similar skill set. They're not the same player, clearly, but I would say Jacobs. I think Jacobs because his size, the way he runs, his ability in the passing game makes him like a high floor type of dude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you have him 40 overall right now. You wouldn't draft him in the first round, but you could see maybe an NFL front office investing.
Yes. Yeah, I'm still very like hardcore into the like it's a waste to use a first round pick on a running back. But the NFL thinks differently.
For sure. For sure.
So speaking of players that you might be higher on than consensus, I see you've got Kelvin Harmon out of NC State. This is a guy that I was a big fan of as a freshman. He's a guy that's coming on my podcast on Thursday. So we're going to get some answers out of him. We're going to probe him. Tell me why you like Kelvin Harmon more than consensus.
I guess I would say I do. I don't know for 100% if I do like him more than consensus. I think I've got him ranked. Let's see. I got him ranked 36. So would you say that's better? That's higher than consensus right now?
Yeah, I'd say so. With sort of
slightly anyway.
When you pair his athleticism versus some of the other guys, you know, Arcega-Whitesides, you know, a couple of these other guys that have tested better than he did, I think you've got him higher than them. He
is the Devin Singletary of receivers, like 100%. People were talking about him as like a top 3, top 4 receiver going into the combine, and then we all forgot about him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like everyone else was so freaking like explosive or exciting, and he just got passed up straight up passed up. And so I think he's falling down a lot of people's boards. I think he does have some limitations in the sense that he's the same deal as you know, like a N'Keal Harry, where he's not going to necessarily separate on his own. He has to be in an offense that the quarterback is willing to kind of throw it into traffic or throw it into like tight coverage, because I don't think he's going to get wide open all the time. But I think he's got a skill set that works at the NFL level. Like he's very physical. He dominates at the catch point. You know, I think he's athletic enough. His athletic profile is not exciting, but like just the way he plays on the field, I think he's athletic enough. So he has a place in the NFL, I think, and he's kind of the same deal. Like he's probably not going to be a star, but I think he'll be a good player.
Are you still rolling with the Ohio State Mike Thomas comparison? You kind of see a little bit of that in his game, or?
Yeah. So is that what I have for him right now?
I think you had that, and you had Michael Crabtree as well.
Yeah. When I first watched him, and this was my first impression, I thought he just looked like Thomas the way he moved. I think it was just like the way he was running and running routes. I might back off that a little bit now. I think Thomas is definitely more athletic and longer and more capable of getting open, but I do think just kind of the way they moved was similar, and so I think that was why I thought of Thomas. But yeah, I mean, even I've fallen off of him a little bit just based on like all the you know, combine stuff. I think I had him in the late 20s or something before the combine. He's fallen out of the first round, and so.
But I think your point is one to kind of keep Harmon home. It's not maybe necessarily the right thing to do to completely do these 180s and it probably says more about the person and their process if you have a guy inside the top 2, 3, 4, 5 and then you're dropping it. You know, it's either you didn't trust what you were watching the first time, or
it
can happen again, or you just, again, I'm a big believer in the combine, as you said before, it definitely matters, but maybe you're putting too much stock in the test scores and stuff like that. So there's definitely that middle ground there, and completely falling off a guy is probably more bad process than anything.
So and then go ahead.
Go ahead, man. No, I was gonna say I was going to move on to your next guy. If you
Yeah,
have
so was
something
I.
you wanna add to
Let's
Harmon.
do.
Okay.
No,
yeah,
let's
yeah.
go ahead.
I was going to say, speaking of going from a guy that underwhelmed in athleticism, a guy that just had his pro day, didn't do anything really at the combine, Arcega-Whiteside. That's another guy that you have noted on here that you're higher on than other people. What do you like about Whiteside?
So, like, there's a lot of question marks with Whiteside. I think when he ran in the 4.4s, that answered some of the questions in the sense, like, is he fast enough to separate? Is he, does he have that ability to, is he a top tier athlete at the size that he is? Like, I think, like, his jumping ability, his overall speed, his profile to me looks a lot better now after we kind of know that he can run in the 4.4s. So he might be climbing at this point, and so I might not be quite a bit higher than him. I think I've got him at 43. I might not be super high on him compared to a lot of people, but I just think his ability to box out is super intriguing, and I like there's valid concern like that he's like a little bit of a one-trick pony or whatever. Like that's like his big thing, but like Harmon, I think his ability to just bully cornerbacks is not going to go away at the NFL. It's going to be harder, but I think he's still got the size on almost all NFL corners. He has the natural ability to box out. He's very, very competitive. I mean, he was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he was like, he had a huge market share at Stanford in their offense.
Yep.
So he's just the numbers, I think the numbers and his style of play, like they kind of match up to me. And so
translate, yeah.
Yeah, so like I think he'd be a really interesting second rounder. Like if the Seahawks, for instance, took him, like I would not be sad.
Yeah. That's one of the guys that I was really hoping the Seahawks would take. The three names I had on my list, because I just know they're not going to spend a first, was going to be Arcega-Whiteside, Kelvin Harmon, Deebo Samuel. Those are the three guys for me.
Yeah.
Because Deebo kind of fits that little bit smaller, has the burst, kick return rusher, kind of gives him that versatile dynamic play. And then Arcega-Whiteside, yeah.
Exactly.
And Arcega-Whiteside is that damn wide receiver that I've been bitching about for like 5 years now. Like, just add this, go draft this guy.
You know who J-Jaw is, or he is who the Seahawks should have made Jimmy Graham.
For sure. Yes, for sure. The Graham thing.
Don't bother making it, like, don't make him a tight end. Just have him flex out and be a red zone dominator. Like he could catch 10 touchdowns just because he can freaking box out like Jimmy Graham was able to do. So I don't know. Don't quote me. He's not going to get 10 touchdowns as a rookie.
And Arcega-Whiteside's not going to cost you an offensive lineman to go bring him in, a Pro Bowl lineman.
First rounder either, yeah.
Right, doesn't make sense. So, yeah, I like Arcega-Whiteside a lot.
Plus, Wilson throws a very good sideline pass, like, and that's kind of like his deal. Like, throw it in the back shoulder. And Wilson's not afraid to throw into tight coverage. So I think that's actually a great fit.
For sure. So let's talk about some guys you might be lower on. This is a guy that the fantasy football community is super high on.
Yeah.
Because they're looking at him like he's just going to be a target machine, which I could see, but it sounds like maybe you might see it a little differently. Andy Isabella out of UMass. What do you think about that guy?
I mean, I'm not like low on him necessarily. Right. I just think I'm not as psyched and incredibly, excited about him or whatever. If he goes to the Patriots, all bets are off. Like,
right.
Whatever.
That's the natural fit.
If he goes to the Patriots, I completely rescind the following comments. But like, when I was watching him on tape, it just, to me, like we were talking about earlier in the show, he just was not exciting to me at all. He had a couple big plays down the field that like show you he could be a deep target down the sideline. But like a lot of it was just sort of on really boring routes. Like, frankly, like for whatever reason, the tape that I watched of him, he just looked like a guy. And so I know that he's uber athlete. I know that he was an uber producer. But I do think he has size limitations. I think he has a very small catch radius. And my compliment for him was Tyler Lockett, which is definitely not a bad thing. But landing spot is going to be pretty important, I think, for him, because he could end up being sort of just like a low volume deep threat. If you want to play him on the outside, if you want to play him in the slot, he could get a lot higher volume, but I don't know if he's necessarily like a touchdown scorer. To me, I just like don't see I'm just not quite as high on him in terms of his fantasy value going forward. I think he'll be a good player, but I don't know if he's going to be like a star. That to me, I just didn't see it on tape, but I definitely understand like the analytics community loves him.
Yeah, this was a guy that kind of, that there's been talks. You always talk about best case scenario when you're talking fantasy football, right? It's like you don't want to talk about the bad places, but let's say a team like New Orleans spent a third-round pick and grabbed a guy like Andy Isabella to add him to a roster like that with an accurate quarterback, that can manipulate a defense and take advantage of a guy like Isabella's quickness and deep threat. A place like that, he'd be really exciting, and I love the Tyler Lockett comp.
Totally. You like the Lockett comp? Yeah, I mean, to me, they kind of like move similarly. Like they're very like short-legged and fast.
Yeah.
So they kind of glide around. Isabella has he has crazy speed, and I'm not taking that away from him. I guess I don't know. I worry a little bit about his size. I think his catch radius is small, and you have to if he lands on a team that's going to really utilize him and focus on him, then all bets are off. But I don't necessarily think he's a guy that's going to come in and be like every team's go-to guy, if that makes any sense.
Right. Yeah, and the issue too with Isabella, a lot of people have gone with the high-end comp, which is the white Brandon Cooks, which is like, and Brandon Cooks was amazing, like a premier talent coming out.
He's been on the best situations in the freaking world.
Seriously, dude. I don't know how he does it. Every quarterback's like better than the last one he played with. It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, the dude's talented. He can run all the routes. So, Andy Isabella, if his ceiling is Brandon Cooks, then good God. I mean, then he's a first-round pick for sure. But
I want to be clear. I'm not an Andy Isabella hater. I just am not quite as high. I think
Danny's trying to save his mentions right now.
Yeah, for sure. It's not Andy Invisibella to you. All right, well let's move on to the next dude. Then how about Damien Harris, running back at Alabama? This is a good.
I think the same deal. I compared him to a pickup truck. I think he's just rugged and reliable, but like absolutely unexciting to me. Like watching his tape, I just could not get excited.
Right.
He wasn't the type of guy who's gonna break a ton of tackles. He didn't seem to create on his own that much. He's just kind of like a reliable 3-down guy. Like I think he's fine. And if he lands in a good situation, their team wants to feature him, he'll probably be a fantasy factor. But I can also see him as the type of guy that gets drafted, say in the second or third round, and then just never really does much. I don't know. I don't know. He just watching his tape, I just was not enthralled at all.
So I think Ryan's on the other side of this coin, possibly. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Harris? I know you like Harris.
Yeah, so Harris actually, I'm on the super opposite side of that coin. He's actually my running back one in this class.
Okay.
So again,
I apologize.
No, you know what? And I totally understand where you're coming from too, because and I really think his ranking for me is more a factor of just kind of the class. I'm not sure I'd be this high on him. Obviously, he came out last year or the year prior. But that said, I do like his kind of complete body of work. I think he does enough in pass pro. I think his hands are there. I think he averaged a little over 7 yards a tote in back-to-back seasons, over 1,000 yards. There were some pretty notable bodies in the Alabama backfield, like there always are. So I don't think he necessarily
played in front of Josh Jacobs at a lot of times is definitely
that might say something in itself.
It definitely says something. I bet the NFL likes him more than I do. I'm sure they do.
And I think again, we talked about it before a couple times. Again, I don't think his tape necessarily was super fun or exciting for me, but I feel good about how he translates to the next level. And I'm coming at it maybe from more of a fantasy spin, where I think, to your point, NFL teams are probably going to invest a bit higher than a lot of people think. So he's going to have the draft capital there as well. And I think he's got the build to kind of insert himself in as a 3-down back almost immediately. And again, just has a really well-rounded profile to me, but probably more a factor, and he benefits from kind of an underwhelming class. But
who's like your comp for him? Do you have a comp?
I don't. I think did you write down Carlos Hyde for yours?
Carlos Hyde light.
Yeah, I like it.
I think that kind of fits.
Yeah, admittedly, I'm pretty bad drawing those parallels, but I do think that they're super helpful. Like that's why I was so excited with the way that you had your draft guide laid out, because I think comparisons are very, very helpful to kind of help.
Comparisons are so hard to do.
So hard, dude. They're so hard. But and Harris in particular is really difficult, just because I don't think he necessarily stands out as any one particular back. It's probably one of those Franken cops for him or something like that.
Totally. Yeah. So I mean, I think we're not that far apart. I think.
Right.
honestly, but he's just unexciting. But I bet the NFL will like him.
Fair enough.
You know?
That sounds like consensus too. Hey, I know your time is valuable, Danny, so I want to jump ahead to kind of one last topic here.
Okay.
We haven't really talked about it with anybody. Let's talk about quarterbacks just for a minute here.
Sure.
Assuming you have Murray or Haskins, QB1, QB2 in some order, how close are they for you?
I like Murray a little bit more. I think I've got him at like 10 and 13, but I think I like Murray quite a bit more. I think Haskins has a lot of upside, and they're a completely different style. Like they're as far different styles I think as you can like come up with, because Haskins is a prototypical sort of old school style pocket passer. Can't move, can't throw, if you get him off his spot, he starts to struggle. Like he's not going to throw on the run. I mean, he can slide around in the pocket pretty well. But I think I compared him a little bit to Nick Foles, just a sense like if he throws on time and if you give him protection and stuff, like he can pick you apart. But he's not dynamic. Murray, by definition, is like dynamic. He's
the complete opposite of that for sure.
Yeah, he's all over. He can move around the pocket. He can throw deep. He's accurate. He can run. He's like freaking Tariq Cohen or something as a runner.
Yeah.
And so he's like completely different. But of course, you worry about the size. You worry about the lack of, I mean, both of these guys have a lack of a resume in terms of they're like both 1-year starters, which is generally speaking a very bad thing. So I think there's definitely a lot of red flags with these guys, but I would say I really like Murray, and I like Haskins a bit. Pretty high on Haskins.
with Murray, I mean, what is the comparison for Murray? I mean, we obviously see a lot of Russell Wilson given the size and his dynamic ability on the ground, but again, that's a super high ceiling. I mean, is there a fair comparison for Murray?
He was like the hardest one for me to find out. I called him pint-sized Mike Vick, but it doesn't work that great. Yeah. I think he's obviously got some. I would say he's more like Mike Vick as a runner. As a passer, I don't even know who he's like. I guess he sort of has some similarities to Baker Mayfield, but they're different types of quarterbacks. But he's almost like just this unicorn, which makes him hard to project because there's just never really been a guy quite like him, especially someone that short, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
I know Ryan and I kind of talked about this, and this question might be slightly off the cuff from what we have in the show sheet here, but when you look at Murray and you look at Haskins and you look at the previous draft class, where do you kind of see these guys fitting amongst that group? Are they the front of it, the middle, the back? I mean,
I would put Murray. So I did this recently. Let me try and remember. So I had Mahomes, Watson, Mayfield, I think are like on the tier 1. And then I would probably put Murray. Who am I forgetting? Anyone? Trubisky's in there.
Those top 3 seem like a really good place to start for sure.
So the other guys are like Trubisky, Rosen, Josh Allen, and then who else? Anyone else? I think that's about it.
That's probably them. Yeah. So I mean, where would you slot? You think Murray or Haskins?
I think I would put Murray at right after that first tier. I think at the top of the second tier. Like I would be more excited about getting Murray than having Trubisky. I still don't really buy the Josh Allen hype. So, I mean, obviously he did some exciting things on the ground as a rookie and he threw deep a lot, but I think there's still a lot of questions whether he's going to be a long-term starter.
For sure.
So I think to me, like that's where I'd put Murray. And then I would probably that's where it gets tough because I think I'd probably put Haskins in the sort of same tier as like the Trubiskys of the world. Although they're very different styles, but like in the right system, I think Haskins could excel. And then same deal with Allen. Like obviously he's got the traits, but there's a lot of question marks. So I'd probably put him somewhere in that second tier. I don't know exactly where I'd do it, but yeah.
All right. Well, okay. So here, last question for you, and we'll get you out of here. Your favorite quarterback outside of the consensus top 2, Haskins and Murray, who's your number 3?
I still think Locke is probably the number 3 guy, although I think Greer is definitely interesting. Greer's ability, his ability to throw deep with accuracy and touch, it makes him very interesting to me.
Yeah.
if he could get into an offense where, like an air raid style offense, kind of like what he was doing in college, I think that there's been a couple of comparisons thrown out, like Case Keenum and Ryan Fitzpatrick was my comp for him. I think, like,
Love that.
Put him in the right system and he could, like, tear you apart, but, like, in the not right system, like, he would just be terrible kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know, landing spot is very dependent, but I think I like Locke third, and just based on his skill set. He makes some really good throws at times. I think he's still, like, just all over the board in terms of his decision making. Like, his penchant to, like, throw off his back foot and try and do Aaron Rodgers style throws is really annoying. But at the same time, I saw the stat from PFF, like, he only had like 6 interceptable passes last year or something like that. It was, like, really low.
Yeah,
and so I was like, wow, that's surprising because it seems like he's just an idiot sometimes. But maybe he's just, like, throwing it out of bounds or something. So I think he has a skill set, and he does seem to have kind of the mentality, the confidence to be like, obviously that's, like, way lower than the skill set thing, but I think it is important. So I don't know. I would probably be very nervous about picking him in the first round, but I like him way more than Daniel Jones. And I think Will Grier would be my number 4.
Awesome.
I like it.
Yeah.
I think Daniel Jones being in the first round conversation is just crazy.
Oh, the timeline in next week is going to be incredible if he goes, like, top 10. If he goes in the first round, it's going to be incredible.
He's going to. Like, it almost feels like a foregone conclusion at this point, just based on, like, everything we're hearing. Unless somebody is just telling them lies. People in the media are all saying it.
Oh, it's ridiculous. It's possible, man. Draft day is just next week, man, so I'm looking forward to it. Dude, I appreciate it. We went way over what I projected. I told you it was going to be like an hour.
Oh, no, it wasn't actually. It wasn't too bad.
We're definitely pushing
I got to it late. So
awesome, dude. Yeah, like 5 minutes late. That makes up for it. So, well, dude, I appreciate you coming on. To everybody, man, go check out Danny. Find him on Twitter at Danny B. Kelly. I'm sure tons of people are already following you. Go check him out at theringer.com. His work is gospel. It's awesome stuff. And as the draft gets closer, he's definitely somebody you want to key into. Ryan, thank you for showing up as always and doing your business. And thank God Matt Kelly wasn't here this week.
Thank God. Exactly what I was going to say.
He would have torched this place. Would have torched it to the ground, man. All right. Well, I appreciate it. And thank you very much for coming on, Danny.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Man. Take it easy.